Hey there, this is Tracy Lawrence for Grand Family Planning. How's it going? All right, so I thought I'd just give this a shot and see if anyone was hanging around. Back in the days when I worked in typography. You may well ask, what's that? We used to work the night shift, actually the overnight. It was called lobster shift in those days. And, on a holiday weekend like this is, we would often experience what I referred to not so affectionately as the dump and run. And that was, clients who were in a hurry to go off to vacation, and they would just kind of rush through whatever they were finishing off, and then they would kind of just send you stuff and say, must be perfect, make sure it's here first thing on Tuesday morning for our deadline. And there was nobody to call, nobody to ask questions of. You just kind of had to deal with the situation and try to do the best you could to get their thing produced. So I thought, well, there might be some folks out there who are dumpies, who are waiting around for somebody to dump their last things on them before they start their holiday weekend. So I thought I'd kind of pop on and see if anyone would show up. And you know what? Even if no one shows up, well, this sucker's recorded. And one thing that I've learned is that people do watch these recordings, So even if there's nobody watching right now, there may be somebody who down the line is looking for information on caregiving and what they need to know, and they might actually stumble on this recording of me talking about caregiving, because I am the caregiver's caregiver. The reason I do this, just so you know, I have been a caregiver a number of times, starting with my husband before we got married back in the 80s. When we were still living together in Jersey City, my husband, he developed an earache that wouldn't go away. And turns out that he had something called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma of the head and neck. So I got a first-hand look at what it takes to treat cancer. And it was pretty scary at the time. But thankfully, we went through it. We had a great network of friends, and we had support, and we also had really good health benefits. And it was before HIPAA laws. So what was really nice was that even though we weren't even married, when I asked the doctors questions, because they knew of my relationship with their patient, they would answer the questions. They would treat me with respect, and I was, a partner on Team Bob. So, we worked together to get Bob well, and as of March 1989, he's been in remission. So I'm a very grateful girl. And then, of course, fast forward many, many years to 2003, my dad, who I was privileged to call a friend of mine. He was a really lovely guy, very sharp, very funny. Dad lived in Florida with Mom, and I lived in New Jersey with Bob. And, we would talk on the phone on a regular basis. And Dad was really good at making it seem like everything was great. And they really did have an outstandingly good retirement for a good 15, 16 years. They had a lot of fun. They had a lot of friends. They had a social life. They did stuff. They lived in a beautiful apartment on the water, on the Intracoastal Waterway, and looking out at the ocean. And it was great. But I get on the phone with Dad, ask him how he was feeling. Oh yeah, little aches and pains, but I can't really complain. And then we went down to go see him, and he had plenty to complain about. He was not well, and it became frighteningly clear when we saw him that things were not right. So it was a rough time, and it was a real epiphany. And that was when I had my first major, wake up call about how when people we love become ill, it really becomes a family affair, because it doesn't matter how distant you are. It doesn't matter how your relationship has evolved. It doesn't even matter if you don't like those relatives, because at the base of it all, you really love each other. You know, we love people we don't like, and that's a fact of life. And another fact of life is that people get sick. So, and when they do get sick, there comes a time when you've really got to plug in and help and be there for them and be an advocate for them, because sometimes when people age and they get sick, they really can't advocate for themselves. So I learned that I was going to have to plug in and deal with their finances, learn about stuff like long-term care insurance. I learned a whole lot about dementia, and I had to, because my father had it and nobody was able to diagnose it properly. And my father had a lot of other cross-complicating illnesses, which made the situation even more alarming, because they couldn't really treat him. Any treatment that they could give him for one thing would disrupt the house of cards, and they would all come tumbling down. So we just basically had to deal with it. And the thing that was very clear was that my father did not want to live. He was extremely unhappy with his condition. He did not want to be kept alive. He told me point blank, "Trey, every day I wake up, I am disappointed." So, you know, you go through something like that, and it really wakes you up to some facts, and it makes you look at life in a very different way. So my dad passed away in 2004, and my mom was left to sort of fend for herself. She, God love her, wanted to remain independent, and she lived down in Florida on her own. But she, you know, she did cause us concern, and my husband and I spent all of our vacations, whenever we had them, in Florida to go down and make sure that mom was okay. We check out her apartment, check her out, take her on errands, and make sure that everything that needed to be fixed was fixed. And you know, would peek in on her. But in time, those visits were, you know, more revealing of deeper issues, and in time, it became clear that my mom had dementia also, and that was hard to take. And she managed to live for many years after she was diagnosed with dementia. She had a number of conditions as well. She had high blood pressure, she had diabetes, she had macular degeneration. And she had a heart attack in 2006. Her gallbladder had to go in 2009, and I intervened with all of those things. And then when it became clear that she couldn't live by herself any longer, she came to live with my husband and me. She did some stints at assisted living, came back, and then she had a major psychotic break in 2010. And that's when I started hiring caregivers in my home to help take care of her, because I was afraid that I was, you know, I was going to miss something, and that, you know, she was going to fall or hurt herself. And it was good to have other people around who could help her with meals and listen to her, you know, keep her engaged, socialize, help her with the remote on the TV, things of that nature, take her medications. So, and in time, that wasn't working out too well anymore, because she was having, you know, episodes of falling down on a regular basis. And she, you know, it became clear that we couldn't take care of her in the home any longer, and we had to find another scenario. So she went to assisted living, and then it was a process where she went from assisted to She was hospitalized, she was in rehab, she was in psychiatric hospital, she was in rehab again, and she was in different kinds of facilities. Turned out that a group home was the best bet for mom because she became paranoid, and whenever she would see people standing around talking and she wasn't included in the conversation, she was absolutely certain they were plotting against her. So she had to be in places where there weren't a lot of people, and that really helped to manage her her symptoms. So she wasn't as violent, she wasn't as upset, and it was a long, sad process. And along the way, I learned a lot about finance. I learned about long-term care insurance. I learned about geriatric medicine. And I learned about the different professionals that I really needed to call upon in order to be able to cope with my mom's situation. I also met other caregivers who were not as lucky as I was. People who kind of fell into it. People who never planned for it. People who did not have the financial resources. People who did not have the support of other family members. And I know people who died because of what I call reckless caregiving. The typical family caregiver takes much better care of the people in their charge than they take care of themselves. They forget that they are human and that they also need to go to doctor's appointments, that they need to take care of their physical and emotional well-being. And all too often that falls by the wayside. So I feel it's extremely important to get the message out to people that, number one, caregiving is going to be in a lot of people's futures. Because when our loved ones get sick, they need us. And even if you're not living with them and bathing them yourself, okay, if you're managing their situation, you're still their caregiver. If you're opening their mail for them and running to the supermarket for them, you're still their caregiver. And you have to understand that. And it's stressful. You know, to whatever degree you have to intervene. You have to intervene and put your own life on hold to some degree in order to help them live their lives. Now, it's my experience that most parents, most loving parents, have this mantra: I will not be a burden to my children. And out of love, out of concern, out of a desire not to burden their children, they will not talk to their children about what they want for the next phases of their life. It's uncomfortable. It's creepy. It makes them feel out of control. It makes them feel vulnerable. It makes them feel mortal. Nobody likes to talk about these things. They are grown-up topics that nobody wants to deal with. And here's the problem. We're living a lot longer than we used to. And medical science keeps us living longer without considering the impact it has on quality of life. And if you are leaving yourself to chance, and if you are leaving these decisions to professionals, then you could very well find yourself in a situation where you have exhausted everything that you have worked your entire life to acquire because you didn't consider what you really would want to happen, and you left it to others who, and I'm sorry, medical community, but you guys have a vested interest in keeping us alive as long as you can. I'm not saying that all medical professionals are heartless. venal bastards. What I am saying is that the profession supports extending life longer than it should be extended and does not support individuals who wish to make a more graceful exit. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is what you need to do in order to plan for that eventuality. Because let's face it, kids, no one gets out alive. We're all going to die. How that happens, it depends on you and what you do right now, this moment, while you're still healthy and aware and inquisitive and wanting to know about stuff. So here are some tips that I am happy to share with people. And, you know, it's we live in a complicated world. And, you know, we also live in a world where we think we can do everything ourselves. You go onto YouTube and there are thousands of videos that will show you how to change a light bulb, or how to fix a particular piece of equipment, how to replace a part on your car. And those are great. I love them. I use them. They're terrific. I love people who share their knowledge with others so that they don't have to spend as much, and they can successfully do things on their own. But there are some things you shouldn't do on your own. So the first thing I'm going to suggest to you is, number one, you got to have a conversation with your family. This is something nobody wants to do. And I talk to caregivers all the time who are very focused on what happened to them because they didn't plan right. Okay. How I spoke to a woman the other day who told me how she and her sister had been taking care of their aunt, who was quite well off. And they put her in an assisted living facility in New Jersey. And because they didn't plan properly, they lost over $100,000 of the aunt's estate. And I said, wow, you know, that's really unfortunate. It's too bad we didn't meet sooner. I might have been able to help you. Now, this was a woman who was clearly no spring chicken. I consider myself not a spring chicken, so, you know, she was older than me for sure. And I said, well, what about you? Do you have children? And she said, yeah. And I said, have you had the conversation with them about what you want for later on? Well, I have a will. So, have you appointed a power of attorney? I said, look, it's okay. But if you have kids and you know what can happen, you don't want to put your kids through what you went through. Am I right? Oh, I have your contact information. I'll be in touch. Run away. I will never see you again. And, you know, and that's a really typical reaction. So I want you to know that I know that that's a typical reaction, and I understand why people react that way, because they're so busy thinking of what happened to them. They cannot conceive of themselves being the elder and then causing grief and aggravation to their loved ones and heirs. So, you know, but it's an important thought to have. Now, I'm a little different. When I went through what I was going through, one of the first things I thought about was, well, oh my God, I don't have kids. And, you know, I don't. So who would be my advocate? Now, of course, my husband and I have power of attorney and healthcare proxy for each other, which is, we're one step ahead of most people who don't know you need those documents. Folks, just because you're married doesn't mean you can speak for each other. So you really need those documents. But I also purchased long-term care insurance. And that was several years ago, before it got really out of control. So I have a really inexpensive policy that covers my husband and me, and has a feature that no one offers any longer, where the benefit goes up 3% every year. So I won't give that up until the premium starts going up, and I don't see the value in it any longer. But for now, we got it. I also have other things, but just so you understand, you know, I was able to make that leap where I was able to kind of say, okay, you know, one day, you know, 20 years will pass in no time, and that'll be me, and I'm going to need to have somebody advocate for me, and I'm going to need to have resources in place so that when I'm not doing so well and I'm not as sharp as I once was and I need help, I have an advocate. My niece, God love her, is my appointed advocate, and she knows where the keys are. So you know, I've taken care of that, and I strongly advise people. And you know, if you're asking like how old do I have to be when this happens, I say 50 is the sweet spot. You're 50 years old, you got kids, you got living parents, you should be having those conversations. You should be having the conversation with your parents about what they want for the ends of their lives, and if they've got their act together, awesome. I'm so happy for you. If they don't, trust me, they're not going to. All right. So it's going to fall on you. And when they get sick, you're going to get the phone calls. You're going to have to scurry. You're going to have to find the resources. You're going to have to make up for lost time. So what I'm saying to you is be proactive. Start asking the questions now. And if you can't get them to plug in and have the conversation, because it's very normal and natural for a parent to give you pushback. They will more often than not say, why are you asking me this? They'll get paranoid, they'll get frightened, they'll get angry, or they'll just shut down. And if that happens, that's okay. At least you started the conversation. Don't badger them, back away. Next step is to try to find somebody to help you. If your parents have friends they trust, if your parents are participants in any kind of community, if it's religious or it's some kind of community organization where there's some kind of hierarchy and a respected authority figure, make friends with those people. Have a conversation with them. Tell them what your concerns are and invite them to have dinner with you and your folks and have that conversation. If you want to know what you need to talk about, I have a free ebook that you can ask for. You can email me, Tracy at grandfamilyplanning.com. It's TRACEY. And I will sign you up for my email list. I need your email address. And I will connect you with this lovely ebook, which tells you exactly what questions you need to ask, and will also help you to determine what other steps you need to take once you've initiated the conversation with your family. Now, again, if you're in that sweet spot where you're in your 50s or older and you have adult children, once you've got your parents squared away, you might want to have the same conversation with your children. Why? Because someday you're going to be in your parents' position. And you want your children to know that what you want them to know who you want your advocate to be. You want to iron that out up front. You want to get that nailed down, because some people want to do it, some people don't. And you know your kids. You know who's the one who's going to want to be there for you. But you want to have the conversation. You don't want to assume. So get the conversations rolling. It's important. Don't talk to your little kids about this. It's a waste of time. But I'm saying if you've got adult children, if you've got children who are past the age of majority, they're 21 or older, they're responsible, they can understand what you're talking about, have the conversation. It's not too soon. Okay. You've had the conversation. You've decided what you want. You've decided what you need. You've decided, you know, when you would want to have the plug pulled. What's next? See an attorney. And you're going to say to me, whoa, wait a minute, I can download documents from the internet. Yeah, you can. But how do you know it's going to cover all your stuff? All right. Everybody, everything, every state, every municipality, we all have little intricacies, little things that need to be attended to. So the chances of you downloading exactly the documents that you need for your situation from the internet and modifying them appropriately for your needs, unless you're an attorney, not really high. So, and even if you are an attorney, if your practice is not about elder law, you probably will not make all the right decisions either. So it's worth it to engage a competent attorney to help you to figure out what documents you need, excuse me, and to put together an estate plan for you. Now, I may also mention that here at Grand Family Planning, we have been working on a new product called Grand Family Estate Plans. And this is a wonderful new product. We haven't released it yet. We're still working on it. But this is a tool that families can use where you get a package of innovative practices to help you to put together an estate plan that covers a wide range of issues, legal, financial, and you know, and you know, and all those authority documents that you need. Excuse me. Like your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy, your living will. All those kinds of documents get done within the Grand Family Estate Plan. So you would get everything done in one shot. And it's a really efficient way of being able to get everything done, and we take everything into consideration. So of course, depending on your family and who's in it, and you know how healthy your family members are, will have an impact. But for healthy families who have assets to protect, this is a really great device to look into. So if you have questions about Grand Family Estate Plans, I welcome your inquiries. You can go to the website, grandfamilyplanning.com, or email me, tracy@grandfamilyplanning.com. And if it's not for you, don't worry about it. You know, I mean, it certainly isn't for everybody. But just so you know, I mean, I want you to have the information that you need to make the right decisions for you and your family. So when people come in and the tools that I have to offer through Grand Family Planning are not appropriate for them, know that I have a lot of other tools. And if all you need is a referral to a particular type of professional, I will happily provide it. And depending on where you live, I may not know somebody who practices in a particular profession where you live, but I can at least help you to narrow down who it should be and how to find a good one. So there's that. Okay, so we have the first part, which is the conversation, the second part, which is doing the legal. Okay. You also want to identify assets. That's really important, and this was totally shocking to me when I started working with my folks, because I had no idea what they had. It was a complete surprise to me, and you know, I spent all of my life thinking in terms of theirs and mine, you know, what I work for and what they work for. And, you know, I didn't really ask much of my parents because they were, you know, when I was growing up, they didn't have a lot. Things changed when I was an adult. And once I moved out of my parents' home, my father started doing better, and really grateful that he was able to turn that into a spectacular retirement. So it was great. But even then, you know, my father had a very odd relationship with money, so I didn't like to really ask him. But then once my dad got sick, and you know, he opened up the books to me. He wanted me to know because he needed help. He needed somebody who could, you know, manage everything. And so um, so what you want to do before anybody gets sick is identify what the assets are. You want to know where all the titles are, and you want to make sure that, for instance, title to my dad's car. My mother gave me my father's car after he died. Problem was, his name was on the title and hers was not. So she couldn't just sign it over to me. So we had to get the title transferred to her name, and then from her to me. So it was a multi-part process, and her being in Florida did not help matters one whit. So so that was a nightmare, and that really took a lot of time to unravel. So what I'm saying to you is that you really want to identify items of value that have titles connected to them, and make sure that they're titled properly. So if one or the other passes away, you know, the order of succession is ensured. You also want to check into things like insurance policies and annuities, and make sure that beneficiaries are properly identified. This could be a really big problem, especially if there have been divorces, if people are widowed. It's very important to check on the beneficiaries, because the beneficiary designations can override what's in the will. So you want to make sure that that you have your beneficiaries stated correctly, and you want to do regular reviews on that stuff, especially when people, you know, exit and when new people are born into your family. So you want to check into that on a regular basis. Your documents have to live and breathe along with you. So you don't want to just assume that because you have a life insurance policy or you have a will that the beneficiaries are correct. Too often people make that assumption, and then somebody dies and they wind up leaving all their money to somebody they despised instead of their loved ones. So you really want to check on that stuff. It's important. It changes. So so do that. All right. So, oh, and another thing. This is real important too, because something happened to a dear friend of mine this year that was very troubling. Friend of mine died in a snowboarding accident in January, and he worked for a major insurance company, so I was fairly certain that he had a permanent policy of some sort. But then I learned from my dear friend, his widow, that what he had was a company-paid insurance policy. Why is that a problem? Well, here's the deal with company-paid benefits. The company who pays the benefits gets the tax write-off for having paid for those premiums. So when the death benefit is distributed, it is incumbent on the recipient, the bereaved, to pay the taxes on the death benefit. So that death benefit puts them in the highest tax bracket, currently 39.5% for the year. And that bereaved person will have to cough up just under 40% of the death benefit to Uncle Sam. Folks, you need to know this. Why do you need to know it? Because if you have a company paid insurance policy, well, it's really nice. You don't want to put your loved one in a position where they're only getting 2/3 of what you think you're leaving them. And if that's okay with you, if you know that, it's fine. But if you would like to leave behind more than that, you might want to talk to a professional about filling in the gaps in your life insurance planning for your loved ones. That's another little tip. Okay, what else? You want to get your siblings on the same page. If you have siblings, and you are elected to be the caregiver, and it's pretty obvious when you're going to be the caregiver. Usually you're the one who lives closest. Usually you're female. Now, I'm not saying males don't do this. They do. But generally it falls on a female family member. Whoever takes ownership of the caregiving, my dog just heard a truck pull up, so she's going to start barking. Whoever takes ownership of caregiving duties really needs to have their ducks in a row, needs to have power of attorney for their loved one, needs to have healthcare proxy for their loved one, and also needs to discuss with the siblings what's going down, especially if the siblings live elsewhere. Because what happens is the people who are not in the loop, the people who are not seeing your loved one on a regular basis, don't believe that they're really as sick as you're saying they are. And they're thinking of that loved one the way they've always thought of them, the way they were 10 years ago, the way they were when they were at the height of their powers. They will never believe that this person you're taking care of is going to need the level of care and intervention that you're describing. So you need to be firm with them. You need to make sure that they see the person on a regular basis so they know what's going on, even if you're Skyping with them. All right. You need for them to understand. You need to get them to buy in, because if you're going to step up and you're going to caregive that person, then you need their support. The last thing you need are a bunch of Monday morning quarterbacks second guessing everything that you do for your loved one. You will be amazed at the kinds of things people will say to you out of ignorance. So you really want to make sure that you have these conversations with your siblings, with aunts and uncles, with anybody who might, be putting their nose into the situation. You want to have a conversation with them too. You want them to be aware of what's going on, so later on they're not accusing you of mistreating your loved one. If you're going to give up your job to caregive your loved one full-time, if you're going to move in with them and you're going to give up the place where you live for your loved one, then you better document everything and make sure that they know what you're giving up and that what you expect in return. Because when your loved one dies and you're left in that house where you were a caregiver to your loved one to the bitter end, and then you got the vultures circling around wanting to sell the home out from under you and get their share, that's not a place you want to live. Okay? So you want to make sure that before any of this happens, that you've had this conversation with your loved ones so that you are not left out in the cold, destitute, without literally a pot to piss in, and with no place to live, no resources, no job, no future. We don't want that. Okay. What else do you need to do? All right. Here's another tip. Go visit your parents. If you haven't seen them in a while, go visit. Go see what they're up to. Go see what their place looks like. Start looking in their closets. Start looking in the refrigerator. Look for expired drugs. Look for expired food. Look for stuff that's just sitting on shelves. Look how much they have in the way of clothing. Start helping them thin stuff out. Start disposing of stuff, because you don't want to leave it for after, when they're gone. If there are precious articles of theirs that you would like, again, gather the siblings and start staking your claim. I thought it was really disgusting for people to do that back when I was a kid. And I heard my mom, and not my mom so much, but her sisters and sisters-in-law, talking to my grandmother one day saying, you know, Mama, when you're gone, I want this. Mama, when you're gone, I want that. And it really revolted me. But the truth is, that wasn't a terrible thing to do. I didn't know that then. It was because I didn't want to think of my grandmother as going away. And I thought that they were being vultures. But the truth is, my grandmother had some possessions that wound up in the hands of people who I don't necessarily know she wanted them to go to. So if they'd sorted it out while Grandma was still able to, you know, say, yeah, have at it, put your name on a label, slap it on the back, and, you know, you'll all have, you know, your items when I go. So, you know, things like that are not a bad thing to do. And as someone who had to clean out their parents' apartment in a week, in a different state, let me tell you, I really wish that I had gotten rid of a lot more stuff before the apartment was sold. But I didn't expect to sell the apartment as quickly as I did. Did not expect to get the price. Did not expect to have someone who wanted to close as quickly as they wanted to close. So, but I wasn't going to let a great deal go. So, I went down. I allowed myself a week, and it was. I could have spent the entire month down there, getting rid of stuff, but I didn't. It wasn't. Just did not have the time. Yeah, so a lot of stuff, a lot of great stuff got tossed, and I donated a ton of stuff to Goodwill, and gave tons and tons of stuff away, and threw a lot of stuff away. So took a couple of things that I wanted, but you know, I mean, I didn't take anything that wouldn't fit my suitcase. I did ship a couple of art objects home, but that was about it. So, so what I'm saying is, you know, again, you want to be proactive. You want to have conversations. You want to survey what's ahead of you. And as painful as it is to think of a time when you're going to lose your loved ones, you are going to lose your loved ones. It's just a matter of how and when. And if you plan for it, you're going to be much better served than if you just wait for it to come and bite you in the butt. And it will. It will. Losing loved ones is a very sad, terrible thing to go through. But it's a lot sadder and more terrible if you're responding to everything in crisis mode and making a lot of bad decisions because you're just doing whatever you know seems like it's right at the time, and you're distracted and you're upset and you're sad and you're crying and you're in pain, and that's not the time to be making these decisions. The time to be making the decisions is when everyone's healthy and you are clear and calm, and you can do it in a very loving way. Loving not just for your loved ones, but for yourself. It's a wonderful gift to give yourself, to have the courage to look at the situation as a grown-up and say, hey, you know what? This is real. This is going to happen. Now, I just gotta put this out there. A lot of people will say things like, oh, well, I have a cemetery plot. That's nice. But there's a lot of living to do between now, when you're still walking around healthy and living your life, and the time that you close your eyes for the last time. So you got to plot for the plot. What I'm saying is that there is an awful lot of space in between where you will probably be sick, at least for part of that time before you finally pass away. Now, just to get I saw both extremes. My dad, he got sick and died in a year. Okay, we saw that he wasn't feeling well in March of 2003, and by July of 2004, he was gone. I thought my mom would die very soon after because she and my father were very codependent. But my mother passed away April 14th, 2015, her 64th wedding anniversary. So what I'm saying, and she was sick for a long time. She was, she developed, full-blown dementia, psychosis in December 2010. She became extremely ill and was hospitalized twice the summer of 2014. And she was on hospice for 8 months. Hospice, incidentally, is a wonderful service for families who are trying to cope with the death of a loved one. It's certainly for the loved one's benefit, but also for the family's benefit. And if you find yourself in that situation, I highly recommend finding a good hospice agency. It's a terrific service. And the expectation when you put someone on hospice is that your loved one is going to live maximum 6 months. So when my mother was around after 5, 6, 7 months, this was extremely distressing, and I didn't quite understand why she was still around because she was very, very sick. She was really out of it. I had a false alarm in the end of March where the hospice nurse had called me and said, "You better get down here. I don't think, she's turning the corner and it doesn't look good." And when I got down to the home, she was resting comfortably and she was on oxygen. And the staff told me that before the hospice nurse left, she put her on oxygen. Her extremities had been turning blue. She wasn't getting enough oxygen. So once they put her on oxygen, she perked up, she pinked up, and she started eating, and then she took a nap. And the next day, April Fool's Day, she was actually up and around, and she was getting dressed and joking with the staff and able to go to breakfast. So that was her last big rally. And then on April 14th, I got the call from the hospice nurse that she was active, and she was her nurse did not expect to see her again. Now, I mentioned before that my mother had become violent, and when she said active, the nurse said active, I thought she meant that my mother was becoming aggressive and hitting her, and that she didn't want to see her anymore. And but the nurse corrected me, and she explained that that's hospice speak. When they say someone is active, she's actively transitioning to death. So, and then I had the light bulb went off. Oh my God, it's Mom's anniversary. And I had been praying to my father to come and get her because the pain of watching somebody deteriorate the way my mom was deteriorating was excruciating. And I said, Herb, I promised you I would take good care of Roz as long as she lived, and I have held up my end of the bargain. Now it's your turn. Come and get her, take her home. Well, it was her anniversary, and he was coming to take her home, and I thought, well, of course. She was waiting for her anniversary. Now, I did go to see her, and my brother came down, and my husband and my brother and I were hanging out in her room, and we spent the better part of the afternoon with her. She was on morphine, and she was very comfortable, but she wasn't going to die anytime soon. So I suggested that we leave and wait. My husband and I went for Chinese food, and we toasted my mother's life. And they brought out the check at the end of the meal, the leatherette wallet with 2 fortune cookies. And I took my fortune cookie and I opened it up, and it said, I swear to God, as I sit before you now, it said, "Leave all your old troubles behind tonight." Yeah, wow, right? And I went home and I put my feet up and I waited for the phone to ring. And at 9:02 p.m. it did, and she was gone. And I learned that one of my nephews had gone to visit her before she died. She was waiting to see him. So witness him, or she was alive for him to be there. And once he left, that's when she took her exit. Now, one last brilliant thing I will share with you was that my parents both had long-term care insurance. And my dad, as I mentioned, was, he got sick and died in a year, and he barely touched his policy. My mother, on the other hand, was alive for 5 years with dementia. And I started her claim as soon as she was diagnosed because I wanted to get things going, and I wanted to make sure I used the policy wisely. And I even had an argument with an elder attorney I was dealing with who told me I was using it too soon, and I told her to basically mind her own damn business. Well, in the weeks, months leading up to my mom's demise, I was getting notices from the insurance company that we were running out of money. And I said, all right, well, I'll jump off that bridge when I get to it. I opened a piece of mail on the day my mother died, which was a statement from the insurance company. The last $472 and change had been released from my mother's long-term care insurance. She had exhausted the account. And on April 15th, it hit her checking account. So my theory is that my father was not going to allow my mother to pass to the other side until she exhausted her policy. Being the dutiful wife, she did exactly that. And my father was there waiting for her with a lovely spiritual bouquet of roses on the other side, said, "Kid, you did great. Get in the limo. We're going home." You may think I'm nuts, but that's my story and I'm sticking with it. So I am a very blessed individual, and I am here talking at the internet right now because I want to help anyone out there who's willing to learn how to prepare for becoming a caregiver, because guys, it's only a matter of time. And if you allow me to help you, I will make sure that you do everything possible to protect yourself, your family, your loved ones, to have the best possible quality of life that you can, and to help the people that you love to have a really good death. And I know that there are people who take exception to that term, but I am here to tell you that there is such a thing. My mother, in the last months of her life, never knew fear. She never knew, she was never alone. She was never afraid. She was always with people who cared for her. She was surrounded by love. And she never had anything to worry about. So even at times when she would peek out through a lucid window, she had nothing to fear. And I know that she made it very clear to me. She was grateful, and she was comfortable, and she had a very good death. So if there's one thing I can persuade you to come away with today, is that a good death is possible, and that it is possible to survive caregiving. It is possible to pass on wealth to the rest of your family. It is possible to get through a long-term care crisis somewhat intact. And it is possible to instill a culture of planning in your family so that in succeeding generations, people will be having the conversations, people will be protected, assets will be protected, and everyone you know and you love will enjoy the best possible quality of life for as long as they draw a breath. And I hope that you take comfort in that gift I am trying to give you today. So I wish you a very happy, healthy, safe, and enjoyable Memorial Day. I thank those who protect and serve for having protected and served us. This country is a beautiful and amazing place, and I am very blessed to have been born here, to live here, and to help others to manage to live here with the best possible quality of life that they can. And there's no place better than here. So if you found any value in this, I hope you'll reach out to me. Again, my email address is Tracey, Tracey, at grandfamilyplanning.com. Visit my website, grandfamilyplanning.com. And if you're watching this or you're catching it on the replay, I thank you so much for your time. And I wish you a long and happy life. Plan for the worst, but hope for the best. And I wish you all the best. Thanks. I'm Tracey Lawrence for Grand Family Planning. Bye-bye now.